Now, our reporter Sherwin Bryce-Pease joins us to discuss what is likely to happen in that meeting. Sherwin, thank you so much for your time and good afternoon. Of course, this is an emergency special session, with all the 193 member states. Talk to us about what we can expect from this particular meeting.
So, Nati, a little bit of political theatre in the UN Security Council yesterday in terms of this referral to the General Assembly. You'll recall late on Friday night, Russia vetoed a draft resolution that sought to have their troops removed from Ukraine, that sought to reaffirm Ukraine's territorial integrity, sovereignty and independence, asked for unimpeded humanitarian access, because that, of course, is the big concern here. The UN Refugee Agency talking about some 5 million people that might become refugees as a result of this catastrophe. And just to point out that the UN Security Council will convene again later this afternoon alongside the UN General Assembly to look at, in particular, the humanitarian question that is evolving and developing in that region now. But as you correctly point out, right, we move now to all 193 members of the General Assembly, where they will debate. All countries will speak, including South Africa. There is a draft resolution that has been put on the table, similar to the one that was vetoed by Russia on Friday. But of course, there is no veto in the UN General Assembly. So one really wants to get a broader sense of where the chips might fall today, which countries are supporting this resolution and which countries are supporting the Russian position here, right? This resolution will again call for the sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity of Ukraine to be respected. It condemns Russia's aggression against Ukraine in the strongest terms. It demands the immediate cease of its use of force in Ukraine. So similar language to the vetoed resolution in the Security Council. The difference here is that a number of other countries like South Africa will be able to weigh in on the negotiation process here. And what we are hearing from the South Africans is they want explicit language on a diplomatic track. They believe that a negotiated settlement here is the only way forward. But the resolution doesn't speak specifically to the need for that negotiation, the continued diplomatic path. South Africa wants that to be explicitly stated. So lots of lobbying going on here, particularly from the authors of this resolution. I'm told EU member states have been calling other member states, including the South Africans, seeking to get a better sense of where they will fall in terms of how the text currently stands and some of the permutations and changes that might have to be included if it is to win as much support in the 193 members General Assembly. Understand here that the Russians, the United States, the European Union, the United States and the Ukrainians want as many countries as possible to support this so that they can say, look at how isolated Russia is. Of course, the Russian Federation will be working to get as much support for their own position so that they are not as isolated as the EU certainly seeks to have them.
And in fact, the AU has also essentially described this as a war that should be arrested soon, describing it as a potential planetary disaster. There, of course, are those important meetings happening currently, on the borders of Belarus and Ukraine with the delegates from Ukraine and Russia. I mean, how closely are the member states watching that particular meeting? I mean, this GA meeting has not happened as yet. It's due to happen in a few minutes' time. But I would imagine there is some glimmer of hope, that these two countries are finally sitting and meeting, albeit not the presidents are in these meetings.
It's a complicated scenario, right? It's happening on the border of Ukraine and Belarus. Belarus, of course, a protagonist, allowing Russian troops to launch from their country into Ukraine. So not exactly a neutral party here. So this is the beginning of something. It's the genesis of a process that is likely to unfold. We are not expecting the Russian leader and the Ukrainian leader to meet, and one imagines that might be something that would have to happen in the near future if we are to arrest this situation. These are initial contacts that are happening here. And certainly it's a diplomatic path that we didn't have last week, so will be welcomed from the likes of the Secretary General and certainly from the UN perspective, because they certainly want a cessation of hostilities. That's certainly what the Secretary General called for in an address to the Human Rights Council in Geneva, the opening session of their ordinary session in Geneva underway, where the Secretary General called again for a cessation of hostilities. We're at the beginning of a process here, but the diplomatic path here at the United Nations will also continue. The big question is going to be how much pressure will be brought to bear in terms of the numbers that vote, say, in favor of this resolution. What kind of message is that going to send in terms of being able to bring these countries back from the brink? We don't know the answers to that yet. There's a negotiation process that is continuing. We are watching very closely the contacts that are happening on the Belarusian border with Ukraine, and so we are very, very curious to see what might emerge from that meeting and whether we'll be able to talk about a de-escalation rather than an escalation in this conflict in the hours ahead, Nati.
Speaking about, escalation, just yesterday, President Putin ordering his military command to put nuclear armed forces on high alert yesterday. I mean, one is obviously watching that very closely, considering there are so many discussions at the moment that are happening. But one of the things that, President Putin or Russia, it may seem, have been doing is, trying to basically, put out statements out there that we cannot confirm as yet. But one of the Russian claims at the moment is that, the Ukraine wanting nukes and that they're now fighting Nazis. I mean, how have these claims been received, or is it just another way for Moscow to essentially, try and legitimize what they are currently doing in Ukraine?
The complication, Unati, I think for us as journalists is really to sift through the propaganda, what's real and what's not real, right? We learned a lot about this during the current COVID-19 pandemic. What does the science say? What is true and what isn't? And so we have a very big responsibility as journalists to really take time to understand the positions here, to air the different positions, but also to give our viewers the facts. And what we know is that Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons in 1994. There's an agreement called the Budapest memorandum that was signed by Ukraine, the Russian Federation, the United States and the United Kingdom, essentially with Kazakhstan and I believe Belarus. And essentially what that memorandum did was to give Ukraine assurances that its security and independence would be guaranteed if it were to become a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which it did. It acceded to the NPT, giving up its weapons, much like South Africa did in the early 1990s. So there are questions as to why now suddenly they would want to have nuclear weapons, particularly in the face of a threat from a nuclear armed state. Russia is a country that has the most nuclear weapons in the world, more even than the United States. In addition to that, this claim of neo-Nazis, right? Whether true or not, let's just give you what we know. The current president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, is Jewish. His family died in the Holocaust. Some members of his family were affected by what the Nazi Germans did to Jews in Nazi Germany. So it begs the question why the Russians are saying they are fighting neo-Nazis when the very president that is leading the opposition to that aggression is a Jew himself. So I'm not saying what the Russians are saying is not true. I'm just saying these are some of the facts that will perhaps add to people's understanding of that conversation, Unati.
I certainly agree with you, Sherwin. There is no doubt that this is a very complex crisis, and of course many of the questions are literally buried and hidden in that history. So thank you so much for your time. This is where we have to leave it, unfortunately, for this afternoon. Thank you so much, Sherwin.